Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. This is me again, Dr. Sameh, and this is A230A, and we're doing Candide today, inshallah. I sent you something before the class started. Did you have time to kind of go over it? I sent it perhaps at one point when I uploaded it. This was like a couple of days ago. Anyway, whether you have received it at the time or now, did you have time to go over the video that I sent you? Everyone, anyone? Raise your hand. I can understand if you didn't have time. I know I sent it. It was such a short notice, of course. So Nagwa is raising her hand. Are you indicating that you have watched it, yeah, Nagwa?
Yes, I didn't fully watch it. I watched the first couple of minutes. I didn't have time. I
That's
saw it
fine.
late.
I understand and I appreciate. No, it was such a short notice. I'm sorry. But inshallah, perhaps after the class, you may have the opportunity to. I mean, I created two videos, as a matter of fact, and each one of them is 10 minutes long. You will enjoy it. It sums up the whole idea. This is together with what we're going to say, inshallah, today. So when I say Candide, I know that you read extensively sometimes, and some of you are very well read. So when I say Candide, does it ring any bells? Have you read it at any point in your lives? If if you have an answer, raise your hand. If the answer is yes, Candide, that's fine. I'm not worried. I'll tell you why I'm not worried, because it's a translated piece of work. You may be reading in English or even in Arabic, right? But it's so if English is a second language, so obviously French is going to be a third or a foreign language. Okay. So it's a translated piece of work, and with translation comes a lot of issues and ideas. Um, Sometimes with translation, lots of the nuances are lost. Lots of things are missed and lost in translation, if you like. But if you talk about ideas, and big as they are, philosophical as they are, I think you're not likely to lose a lot or miss a lot. I promise you, when it comes to Candide, it's very humorous, and it's biting humor. Biting means that it's you're making fun of things and exposing follies, social. So it can also be very didactic, in the sense that there is this reformatory end in view, if you like, where the writer is trying to kind of educate people about the existence of something, good or bad. So this is when I say Candide, and obviously no one has read Candide, because it is a translated piece of work and it's not even English. Okay. How about when I mention or drop the name of the author? Candide is written by Voltaire. So when I say Voltaire, does the name ring any bells at the back of your minds?
Yes.
Yeah, good. So, yani Al Jawhara is proving that you guys were not born yesterday. Because I was under the impression every time I ask a question and you say, no, yeah, nah, those guys were born yesterday or something. Okay, Al Jawhara, how much do you know about Voltaire?
I know that he's very famous of his writings.
Okay.
Yes.
So you know him as an author, as a novelist, or as a philosopher, or perhaps both, or what?
I think he's a novelist and author.
Yeah, he is an author, of course, because he writes, and he is also a philosopher. Philosopher means that we're in for something deep. Of course, you know what philosophy, or you have done philosophy at one point, if you still remember, in AA 100A. You did philosophy. You were introduced to people like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, just to remember those guys, right? Remember how deep they were and the kind of questions that they ask. Okay, so we're in for that. We're in for something deep and subtle and nuanced, where you need to think and rethink things. Okay, so what time period are we talking about? Remember, this is the promise that we made that, I mean, you normally have a work or two representing a time period. Remember when we spoke about Othello, it was Elizabethan age. When we spoke about the Duchess of Malfi, it was the Jacobean age, which is not very far away. When we talk about Candide, we're talking about the 18th century. 18th century means 1700, 1750, 1760, 1720. This is the 18th century. How much do we know about the 18th century? We know that it is a time when this is part of what we call the early modern times, where we're still talking about you know, the difference between the medieval period and um, the modern times. And obviously, we're in the modern times. We are in the middle of the modern times, and you know, the modern times and the early modern times comes with their liberalism, with their ideas about progress, with their ideas about science and discoveries and reaching out to other parts of the world. Um, Colonization started, discovering new continents like the Americas. So it was an optimistic age because Europe became very rich, and obviously they became rich because not because they were self-made and they did this or that. I mean, they went outside, they went out or beyond their confines and borders. They went to the Americas, they went to Africa, and they started to loot and steal the treasures of other nations and countries. They became very rich, gold, different kinds of raw material that they would take, and when they manufacture and then they send back to the countries that they stole it from and stuff like that. So as it stands, we're talking about the 18th century, a time where there is a sense of optimism. People are happy. People believe that there is progress in everything, and this progress will not stop, will never stop. Technology is at its best. You know, this was the time when people and scientists like, uh, Newton and the other, and Pascal and all those other philosophers and mathematicians came. And with them came lots of mathematical solutions and scientific solutions to lots of the problems. So again, um, um, there was this sense of optimism, and people were going their ways and started to work, and there was this rise of the middle class, and people started to make money and to live happier, and then there is now nation states and governments, no dominance and hegemony of the clergy people and the people, the people of religion, like we have seen in previous centuries. No, but this is more of a liberal secular kind of society where as a citizen you know your rights, but you also know your obligations. It was a civil society. And again, the idea is that we live in the best of all possible worlds. So 18th century people thought that they live in the best of all possible worlds, and that they haven't seen that advancement or progress. It has not. It is quite unheard of and unprecedented. Um, and they ascribe this to two things. I mean, the idea that we live in a universe. This is the interpretation of religious people, and they happen to be many. They say that, let me check. Yeah. They say that, again, we live in the best of all possible worlds because we're governed by a benevolent God, a benevolent deity. That's why everything is in its proper place, we are blessed, more or less. Um, and of course, there is, I mean, there are signs that tell us that we live in the best of all possible worlds and that God is in control. And it is because of this benevolent God that we have all those kinds of blessings and all those kinds of treasures, and we're happy. And then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, it has always been there, war breaks out and thousands upon thousands of people get killed. And then all of a sudden, an earthquake in Lisbon in Portugal erupts and it kills thousands upon thousands. And it so happens that this was the day when people were celebrating some kind of Eid, and that there was this religious festival or religious feast over there, and people were dressing in their best, and they were going to churches and feeling happy, and then an earthquake struck and killed thousands and thousands. And there was, before that, there was talk about this argument. Yeah, if we're talking about the best of all possible worlds, and if we're talking about a world where God is benevolent, why do we have pain? I mean, people, some people, philosophers especially, they would say, why do we have pain in the world? Why do we have wars in the world? Why do we have disease? And why do people have to die? They started to ask these questions, some philosophers. I mean, if you say that this world is governed by a benevolent God, Muhsin, yani, why? Why do we have that? No, I'm not sharing yet. I'm talking about the argument around which the whole thing will go, and then I'll share slides. Okay. So again, I'm talking about the atmosphere and the climate of ideas. So you have two clashing ideas now. Okay, you have people who believe in absolute optimism, that we have every right to be optimistic because we have all kinds of blessings. And this optimism stems from the fact that we have a benevolent, loving God. And then you have the opposing force and the opposing party, where you have people saying, wait a minute, stop. Okay, we have wars in the world. We have civil wars. We have people killing each other. We have earthquakes. We have volcanoes. We have two tsunamis. We still have disease in the world. People die because of disease and pain. Why do we have pain? Okay, so this is what the whole novella is about. It's you have those two strands, if you like. You have two conflicting forces. Um, Okay, so you would ask, where does Voltaire stand? Is he with this or that? Yeah. For those who know Candide, I'm sorry, for those who know Voltaire, Voltaire is a skeptical philosopher. Skeptical means somebody who does not believe easily. He is a rationalist. He's a rational philosopher. Empirical means that he needs to see things happening in front of his eyes. Don't talk to him about angels. Don't talk to him about um, abstract ideas. No, as he is empirical, like I said, he is rational. He uses his mind, and whatever his mind does not accept, he leaves it out. Whatever he cannot experiment with, and whatever he cannot touch and feel with his hands and with his different senses, I do not accept. On the other hand, you have people who are, um, you know, traditional or traditionalists who believe that we came to the world and we found our parents, for example, worship a certain god and embracing a certain religion. We follow them. We came to the world and saw our parents eat in a certain way or dress in a certain way. We do like them. So you would have this conflict between and this clash between those two forces. Okay. So obviously, when Voltaire writes a novel or a novella, so what do you think is he going to show? Is he going to show that we live in the best of all possible worlds, or is he disputing and challenging this idea? Because we know him now, we know that he's skeptical, shakak. He doesn't believe
He's gonna be
in.
challenging.
He's going to be challenging these ideas. Absolutely. Okay. So you need to also know that he is also satirical. Satirical means he has a sense of humor, a biting sense of humor, and he uses in his work. So if he's going to make fun of something or expose something, what do you think he's going to make fun of? Um, Liberal ideas or traditional ideas? Course, he's going
Maybe
to expose,
traditional.
yeah, whatever is traditional. He's going to be all the time, exposing and challenging those traditional ideas about the existence of God, the existence of a benevolent deity or God. He doesn't believe in any of that. Okay, so we will have Voltaire on the one hand, and we will have a number of philosophers who are trying to justify the ways of God, if you like. They are trying to say that we live in the best of all possible world. Like Leibniz. Leibniz happens to be a philosopher, a German philosopher. He is a mathematician and a scientist and everything. And he is quoted, he's credited with this statement. He says, he always says, we live in the best of all possible worlds. And then people come to him, okay, tell us. If we live in the best of all possible worlds, why do we have wars? Why do we have earthquakes? Why do we have pain? Why do we have disease in the world? And he starts to say that it is true that we have disease and pain in the world. It is true that earthquakes hit like whenever you least expect them. But these are all partial evil, شر جزئي. You're which is obviously part of a larger good that you're seeing because you're a human being and you're so limited. You cannot realize and understand the wisdom of God. This is Leibniz. And then comes another um, um, important figure like Alexander Pope, the very famous English poet, and he says the same thing. Partial evil is this is all partial evil, and we are limited. We are limited human beings. That's why we cannot see the larger picture. This is only the part where it's as if they're saying that you're looking only at the half empty part of a glass. You're familiar with this when you have a glass and it's half full, half empty. They say if you're pessimistic and negative, you look at the half empty part of the glass. If you're optimistic, you look at the half full part of the glass. That goes this way. So this is what the whole novella is about. So it's a novella, not a novel. And obviously, a novella is shorter, way shorter than a novel. It's not a short story, mind you. A short story is too short, and a novel is too long. So a novella is somewhere in the middle, not too short for me to call it a short story, and not too long for me to call it a novel. And also, it is a work in translation. It's translated into English, so we're not reading the original. And like we said, it's written by the philosopher Voltaire, who is a skeptical philosopher, okay, who is an empirical تجريبي. يعني تجريبي يعني بيجرب، لازم يشوف الحاجة بإيديه وقدام عينه عشان يصدقها. So he's an empirical philosopher. Okay. So what's how is he giving expression to all those ideas? The novel is a metaphor where it's a metaphorical journey. You know what a journey is. You move from one place to another, you travel from one country to another. So it's a journey, and it is as much physical as it is philosophical. So on the surface level, you see people moving from one country to another. Yeah, this is a physical journey. That's fine. But on a more abstract level, you have a philosophical journey. Philosophical means that they move from one idea that they believe in to another idea to a third. So you have this trajectory, you have this movement. That's why we call it a journey, and we call it together with being a physical journey, a metaphorical and a philosophical journey, where ideas are being introduced and exposed and discussed and debated along the way. Again, what are those ideas that they discuss as they travel? What is it that they are trying to prove or perhaps refute and dispute? It's the idea of us living in the best of all possible worlds. Okay? So when we first meet the characters, so who are the characters? We have Candide, or Candide, like they say. So Candide is a young man, and obviously he is orphan and a foundling, his father and a family-less kind of guy. And he has a teacher by the name of Pangloss. They used to live happily in a place called Westphalia in modern day, somewhere in Europe. I think Westphalia is a part of Germany or something. And I mean, life was good and everything. And he was in love with Cunigund, who happens to be perhaps um, the daughter of a baron or a lord, and everybody was happy. And then because of this love connection that they have, he was thrown out of the castle or the palace, and then things start to take uh, a negative or a nasty turn. There is war erupting, and they have to flee for their lives. And Kunugan gets taken away, and she moves from one country to another, and she is reduced to a mere, um, you know, um, uh, let's say, slave. Of course, she's treated in the worst of manners and everything, abused and everything. And part of what Candide is doing is that he is looking for her in other, I mean, he moved from one country to another to looking for her. And uh, he has his teacher, Pangloss. And part of the search is not only for Kjönigan, but also for values. They are obviously, or perhaps Candide, is trying to confirm, to go to other countries to confirm what he knows about the world through the eyes of Pangloss. He is trying to confirm that we live in the best of all possible worlds. So he started off where he was in Westphalia, and he saw the wars, people killing each other. When he spoke to Pangloss, Pangloss, you're the one who told me that we live in the best of all possible worlds and we should be optimistic. What is happening? People are killing each other. There is a civil war. There are wars, and Pangloss starts to tell him, no, you are limited in your knowledge. No, it's for the best. What is happening is for the best, and you are limited. You cannot see. You are only seeing the half empty part of the glass, and you're limited in your knowledge. And then they start to go somewhere else, again, to confirm the idea that they live in the best of all possible worlds, and also to meet with Kjönigan. They go to another country, another part of the world, and they see also miseries. People are killing each other, and then they move on and on until they go to a place called El Dorado. And with El Dorado, they see people like, I mean, this is obviously in South America, where they see people behaving in a very different way than them. Different in the sense that they have gold all over the place. The land is filled and covered with gold, and nobody is interested in gold. So gold is obviously the cheapest material in that country, El Dorado. And because of their greed as human beings coming from the old world, they try to collect the gold, and then they are very amazed that people are not interested in gold. It's gold. I mean, they stay obviously for a while, but they are not happy because they are, they belong to the old world where greed is the order of the day. They are not happy. They are very acquisitive. They want to amass as much gold as they want, or as they can, and they want to leave. And they eventually decide to leave with, I mean, having loads of gold and stuff. And then they go to other places where they meet a slave, and the slave starts to tell them about his miserable kind of life that he leads, and the fact that that a dog or a cat is better off than himself, and how his limbs and legs were amputated, and it's sad. And then on the way, they meet an old lady, and she starts to tell them about her story, also full of misery, and how she was abused. She was reduced to working as a bad woman, and all kinds of miseries. And they move on and on and on and on until they arrive in Turkey. Of course, it wasn't, it's Turkey, modern day Turkey, but at the time it was the Ottoman Empire. And they went to Constantinople, and uh, they were taken somehow to perhaps the countryside or to outside of town where they met a dervish, dervish. What is so characteristic about a dervish or dervish is that somebody who's, I mean, clothes are not in order. I mean, he has this long beard. It's not trim. Why is the dervishes behave? Why do they behave like this? Because they um, they are not interested in material things. They are not interested in this world. They talk to you about the other world. They talk to you about religion. So they are not really interested in the world. And they from time to time they would give you nuggets of wisdom about how material this world is and how we should get rid of our material and focus on perhaps praying and living a simple kind of life. So they meet the this dervish, and then at one point they go and meet another man, the old man. He doesn't have any, and they go to him. Obviously, he is not in the city. He lives far away in one of the towns, and they go to his farm. And when they go to his farm, and Pangloss starts to talk to him and argue with him. He asks him to shut up and to mind his own business and to mind or to take care of his own garden. And in one of the interpretations, it seems that this is the conclusion that he came down to, that you need to mind your own business. You need to, kind of farm your own garden. You shouldn't think of those big ideas, optimism, the world, and how the world is built, religion. And he says, no, you need to focus on yourself before you think of reforming the world. Go and perhaps set up your own bed. Now, this is a very interesting statement that before you go and fight and change the world, go and mind your own business. You can leave your bed in all sorts of disorder, and you think of other people's houses and you want to change the world. No, start with your own yourself. This perhaps seems to be the message that Voltaire is trying to get across to us. So as you can see, we have a physical journey, and correspondingly, and along this physical journey, you have a philosophical journey. Okay, so you have obviously three types of philosophies in the novel. The philosophy of optimism, that everything is fine, that everything is perfect. You have the philosophy that is opposing this kind of philosophy that sees pain and disease and earthquakes as reasons for us not to be optimistic or happy. And then you have a third philosophy that comes from the Middle East that tells you mind your own business. Don't focus on the big issues. Tend to your garden. Don't bother yourself with others and their affairs and what they do and what they don't do. Focus on yourself, please. Okay? So this is what the whole hustle is about, if you like. Let's go. Okay. Do you have any questions so far? Because I seem to be monopolizing the talk like always. Any questions so far?
No, thank you.
Okay. So far, so good, huh? I advise you to read the novel, the novella, and I would like you to read it in to read it, not to read a summary, because it's not big, and you're missing out on a lot if you don't read the novella itself, because it's very funny, funny in a sad way, of course, because nothing is funny about having earthquakes that claims the lives of thousands of people, obviously. Nothing is funny about having minorities, whether they are women, whether they are slaves, whether they are Jews, whether they are Anabaptists, and they are suffering at the hands of majorities. So obviously nothing is funny about that, but what is funny is how this is treated and the situations that the people are put in. Um, okay, let me share what I have. Can you see that?
Yes, Doctor, we
Yes.
can.
Okay, yes. So it's Candide that we're doing, and so we're talking about journeys, and when we think of the idea of journeys, we um, we think of that would invoke other journeys, literary journeys that happened before and during the time of Voltaire. So Voltaire is not one of a kind when it comes to journeys. Um, Again, what would trigger this motif or motive of journeys would be the idea that the Europeans started to move beyond their borders. Um, okay, so as part of the climate of ideas that we have two very important revolutions, two major upheavals in European history, whether we're talking about late 17th century or 18th century. We're talking about the Glorious Revolution, the English Glorious Revolution of 1688, and we talk about the French Revolution in 1789. Again, those revolutions are going to prompt people from Europe to go beyond their immediate borders, where they are going to have power and they are going to colonize other countries and other nations. Again, when you travel to other countries, you collect impressions about those countries, and sometimes this is what people do nowadays when they uh, video blog. Um, they go to other countries and they either compare the country that they come from to the country that they arrive at. Perhaps they highlight the merits and the good things about the country that they travel to, or perhaps they make fun of their traditions. Perhaps they try to establish the fact that we have a common humanity. So you have all kinds of ideas coming out of those kinds of journeys that people embark on. Um, so we're talking about fictional travel narratives. And these are sometimes taken from actual travelogues, people who actually travel, um, and they look at other countries. And we have examples even in Islamic culture and in Arab culture. We have, I'm sure you're familiar with people like Ibn Battuta. Who else do we have? So in Arabic, you have Ibn Battuta, you have Marco Polo, who went to China and lived there for a substantial part of his life. Who else do we have? We have Ibn You have Biruni who went to
عباس اللي
India.
في الناس أتوقع.
Abbas is an inventor, didn't travel. He invented, and he tried to invent the prototype of the aeroplane. No, I'm talking about travelers, people who travel, and when they travel, they collect impressions about them, and they write about other countries, and they come and tell us about those things through their books.
Like ابن بطوطة.
Yeah,
Captain Nemo.
and is it a cartoon or something? I'm not. You're talking about when? When is that, yeah, Al Jawhar?
I think he wasn't an author or anything. He was traveling. He was a captain. He drew maps and everything.
Yeah, this is an aspect, and this is part of it. Yes, and I'm saying that we have very famous people, and nowadays that the travel bloggers that we see are part of it. We have so many all over the place now. In every country, you have a number of bloggers traveling to other countries and telling us about their habits and traditions. And, so this is what we're trying to establish here is that the reason why people started to travel and go on journeys was because of Europe opening to the world and the expansions that they made, the discoveries that they also made. So much so that we started to have a genre of literature that we call now travel narratives and journeys. So when was Candide published? It was published in 1759, and it was issued in 3 different editions. And you would ask why you would have 3 editions in the same year, or when it was first released, because Candide, I mean, Voltaire and his publisher believed that it is going to be confiscated. The government or the governments where it will be published, or in the countries where it will be published, will confiscate it, will kind of take it right away because of the criticism that it has, because of its blasphemous nature. It is against religion. It questions and challenges religions and the wisdom of God. So that's why when he issued it in 3 different editions. And he also published it in 3 different places at the same time: Paris, Geneva, and Amsterdam. And he also, as a kind of strategy or maneuver, he said that this is, by the way, this is not my book. This is a translation of a book I took from Germany, from the German of Dr. Ralph. So obviously he is trying to also avoid being persecuted and being investigated. And then he eventually admitted that he is the author in 1768, when people started to read it, and he started to feel a little bit safer. And here we have examples of travel novels and travel journeys before and during the time of Voltaire. You have the first travel writer ever is a historian by the name of Herodotus. He is a Greek historian of the 5th century. And when he wrote about his travels, he wrote about areas that are that have to do with the morals and religions of the countries that he visited. And then you have Pausanias or Pausanias in the 2nd century. He also traveled through Greece, And he started to describe the belief systems and the cults of the communities he visited. And then you have the English writer Thomas More, who wrote Utopia, a very famous piece of work. He wrote it in 1516, and it is an imaginary world where he believes that there should be equality and everyone should have access to everything. There is no private property, and then during the time of Voltaire himself, there was Jonathan Swift, that famous Irish novelist who wrote Gulliver's Travels, where there is also a great deal of criticism of satire. Obviously, Gulliver's Travels is exposing and is challenging the idea of having a perfect society, a utopian society. So it is more of a dystopia than a utopia. And perhaps this is a good time to tell you about the difference between a utopia and a dystopia. Do you know what a utopia is? Anyone and everyone? What's a utopia? Yeah, Reem, go ahead.
It is the good place, or everything is perfect in there.
Yeah, it's an imaginary. Normally, it's an imaginary place where everything is perfect, no injustice. People are equal in everything. The two genders are equal. No
No
discrimination
wars.
based on religion, based on gender, based on race or ethnicity. So this is what we call utopia, and normally you have writers writing utopias in order to promote those values and ideas. But does it exist? Obviously, no,
No,
right?
it's
No.
not.
So this is what we call utopia, and we have so many of them, and one of them is Thomas More's Utopia. And then you have other writers, and they come and they say, yeah, this is silly. We don't have such a thing. Utopias do not exist. And then they write this utopias. So you have the word, the prefix this, which means anti, which means the opposite of utopia. So if utopia is about a perfect world and a perfect place, this utopia is about a place that is full of corruption, that is full of injustices. So it is meant to make fun of the utopia. So you would have perhaps the same characters, but they are behaving in a different way in this utopia. So any piece of work that you see where you have corruption, where you have dictatorships, where you have uh, um, injustice of all types, we call it a dystopia. And we have examples. If you're familiar with novels like Animal Farm, for example, if you're familiar with I think it was 1984, this is also a novel. We call it a dystopia. So I'm asking you now, would you call Candide a utopia or a dystopia? What do you think? Is it is it a utopia or a dystopia? Yeah, go ahead.
This utopia.
It's a dystopia because we have suffering, we have people reduced to poverty, you have killing, you have abuse. These are things that we're going to see, right? So it's not a utopia. So what Candide, the character, was looking for, he was looking for a utopia. But did he find it? From what we have seen, moving
No,
from no, absolutely not. So it's a dystopia, right? So to some extent, Voltaire writes Candide using a Swiftian satire. Yeah, we spoke about just that. عندي محاضرة بس. Okay. So let's talk about the genre itself. So what kind of work is it? So it is a novella in terms of form. Okay, but in terms of ideas, it can be many things. It can be a roman. Roman means a novel in French, but it doesn't have those strict conventions and generic requirements of a novel. It can also be a philosophical tale, where it can be more or less like a fable or a parable, where you learn a lesson or two. So through the interactions of the characters, through the kind of situations that they are in, you learn something. There is a moral at the end. It can be, in this sense, a philosophical tale. It can also be a satire, which it is. A satire is those kinds of writings that ridicule or mock the feelings of individuals, institutions, and society. So if it is a satire, it is an indirect one, where Voltaire does not say it like it is. Voltaire alludes, Voltaire makes references and puts clues, and you need to put he gives you a puzzle, and he gives you the clues of a puzzle, and all you need to do is to piece them together and come up with your own conclusions. So he doesn't give you ready-made judgments. He leaves it to you as a reader to come up with your own conclusions. And it's all the time about the hypocrisies and the inequalities of the societies of his time. So this is how the original cover page is formatted. So you have Candide or optimism. So the title is Candide and the subtitle is optimism. And it says on the title page that it is translated from the German of Dr. Ralph. Again, we're talking about a journey like no other because as well as being a physical journey, it is an intellectual and a philosophical journey. It's the journey of Pangloss. Remember this optimistic philosopher? From theory, because he is all about theory, to fact. So he provides theories about how happy the world should be, that we live in the best of all possible worlds. But we move from this theory, which is not confirmed or proved on the ground, to facts. Facts about the miseries of life, pain, disease, earthquakes. So Pangloss is, like we said, is Candide's tutor and mentor, and he's a spokesperson on behalf of optimism. And obviously, he falls an easy victim to the mocking and the satire of Voltaire. So what does Pangloss teach us in the novella? He teaches us that things cannot be other than as they are, whatever that means. For since everything is made to serve an end, everything is necessarily for the best of ends. So he's trying to tell people, don't think of the journey. Focus on the destination. Like sometimes we tell people, enjoy the journey and forget about the destination. With Pangloss, it's different. So on the journey, you may have suffering and pain and everything, but the ultimate goal is, pleasure and everything. So he is trying to say to appease people and tell them, no, you are mistaken. He keeps saying that there is no effect without cause, and that we live in the best of all possible worlds. So it is through Pangloss and his philosophy that Voltaire is making fun of optimism, which, like I said, was the dominant and the main philosophy in Europe in the mid 18th century. Where could people see um, those ideas about optimism, and who used to promote those ideas? People like Alexander Pope, the very famous English poet who wrote a long poem called Essay on Man, and in which he was defending optimism and promoting it and saying that we are limited, that's why we cannot see the wisdom of God, and because we're limited, we cannot look at the bigger picture. And there was also this very famous Enlightenment philosopher, Gottfried Leibniz. He was German, and he used to explain uh, away the doubts and the skepticism of people like Voltaire, saying that we live in the best of all possible worlds, and the fact that we're limited, that's why we cannot see the big picture. And this is Leibniz and his views. Um, he started to have this logical or intellectual argument. He says, we all believe that the creator, that God is both omniscient. Omniscient means knows everything, and omnipotent, which means he has unlimited power. So if we believe in that, so we're trusting God and his wisdom. So there is no, there shouldn't be any doubt that what God is doing is for our best. So we should be happy. He believes, yeah, he agrees with people that there are nasty things in the world. There are bad things happening, suffering, disease, pain. But he says, yeah, you stop at them and you believe that they are something big, because you're not omniscient like God. You don't know everything, and because you're not omnipotent, you don't have unlimited power like God. So you're limited. That's why you look at things from your own limited perspective. He believes that if we have setbacks, if we have bad things happening in the world, these are all part of a grand universal plan. And it is only God who, because of his unlimited power and unlimited knowledge, that can see. We are not able to see the grand scheme of things. So since God is perfect by definition, it follows that he can do no wrong. And then comes the earthquakes, like Lisbon earthquake in 1755, and then it is followed by a tsunami, where you have thousands of people killed. And obviously people start to ask, where is this? Why do we have that if it's a benevolent world that we live in? And then what follows is the 7 Years' War between the European powers, where thousands of people get killed. So people start to ask those events and then talk about them to people who believe in optimism and in the benevolence of God and in the omnipotence of God. And then people like Alexander Pope comes and they come and they start to explain. Uh, Again, this is what happens. You would have um, this insistence that there is benevolence and that it's only that we're limited as human beings. That's why we cannot see the good things in the world. And if they fail to do everything, if they fail to explain why there is pain and there is suffering and there are wars, they start to talk to you about the idea of the original sin. What do they say? Especially the Catholics and the people of religion. They say, listen, obviously we have miseries in the world, we have pain and wars because we are sinners and we inherit the sin of. Can you hear me? No.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, good. No, which one I was wearing? I was wearing this one. Okay. So somebody was sent me a WhatsApp message. Let me see. Inshallah. Okay. I'll see what I can do, Anagwa, but I normally, yeah, let me see. Make sure, ya Jama'ah, that your cams are off. And,
I really apologize.
that's fine, that's fine. So, yeah. Okay, so where did we stop? It's Candide, everyone. It's those journeys, whether they are physical or philosophical, and obviously the message is clear, right? So what kind of message is Voltaire trying to get across to us is that you need perhaps to think twice about things. You need not to take things for granted. You need to challenge orthodoxies and you need to challenge received ideas, right? And in order to do that, we have the novella that we call Candide. And of course, by now you know who Candide is and I mean, the teacher that he has and the places that they frequent and go to and the significance of those different kinds of places. So it's Voltaire, everyone. Let me make sure that we're still recording. No. Yeah. So before I proceed, do you guys have any questions? No questions? So it's Voltaire, everyone. Of course, Voltaire is the author, and Candide is the novella or the title of the novella, and then it has a subtitle, which is optimism, which sums it up, sums everything up. And obviously, optimism is the philosophy that was dominant during the 18th century. For good reasons, yes, up till that point, it was for good reason. People seemed that progress is inevitable, that we're moving, the trajectory is moving in a linear way. There is no non-linearity, there is no setbacks, and people are going to make progress as long as they live. And obviously, this was proven wrong because Voltaire and other writers try to prove that there is no justifications, moral or otherwise, for this kind of belief, optimism. This is an introduction that we're not really keen on. It's basically about the fact that Voltaire, whose real name is Francois Marie Aron, who lived between 1694 and 1778, moved between two very important buildings. I mean, his name is normally associated with two very important buildings, two Parisian buildings, Parisian from Paris. One of them is the Bastille, which is a very notorious and infamous, prison. To another very important place where great people, great French people are buried. So he moved between those two places. I'm talking about Voltaire. Of course, before the French Revolution, he was, kind of hunted and haunted by the government for his candid views and ideas. Then after the French Revolution, he became a national hero. This is the Bastille that I'm telling you about, this very famous, or infamous rather, prison, which was demolished by the writers on the eve of the French Revolution. And then you have the Pantheon. Pantheon is also, it's like a hall of fame, if you like, where, pioneers and dignitaries and very famous people are being buried. We're not interested in him, I mean, Voltaire. I mean, perhaps the only thing that we need to know that typical of lots of people, he received this kind of strict religious education by the Jesuits. And it's very strange that he became skeptical of religion over time. It happens. Lots of people, when it's very strict with them when it comes to religion teachings, when they turn or they change, the change is very drastic and very surprising. Again, this is all about him, about his biography, and this is something that we're not very interested in. The only thing that we need to know is that he is radical, in the sense that he has liberal and radical views, that he is also empirical. Empirical means that he only believes when he sees. He does not believe in only using the intellect or only receiving knowledge from sacred books and holy books. I mean, he says, no, if you can prove it, I am with you. If you cannot, and if you're going to refer me to angels and holy Bibles, I'm not with you, because these are things that I cannot prove. And then he talks about the world. The world is his marketplace. The world is his lab. What we see in the world, we see pain. We see disease, we see wars. Okay, so when somebody comes to me and say that this is the best of all possible worlds, I'm going to stop him and say, prove it. And this is all about when Candide was published and the storm that it created and how people were, I don't know, the government and the authorities were not happy, and he had to kind of escape and travel somewhere in order to not to be investigated and stuff like that. And then he goes back to Paris, and then he dies after he fell ill, and then he shortly died, and that was it. And then we have, I spoke to you about this idea of having 3 different editions in the same year and perhaps on the same day in order to avoid censorship in 3 different cities. Remember, we said Amsterdam, Paris, and Switzerland, or Geneva and Switzerland. And another technique or tactic that he used was the fact that on the cover page he would say that this is from the German of Dr. Ralph, as it is as if he is translating the work and it's not his. And then much later in 1768, he would admit and acknowledge the fact that he is the author. And here we have talk about travel writing, and I said that it has a long history. Perhaps it's as old as life itself. People travel from one place to another. They collect impressions about those other places, and when they come back, they make those comparisons between the world that they come from and the world that they go to. Sometimes this can lead them to make negative and even racist judgments. At other times, it can lead them to recognize flaws and weaknesses in their own society. And on yet other occasions, those travels can lead them to reflect upon the universality of the human experience or the human condition. The fact that we all share a common humanity. And here we have examples of early travel writing. We're trying to prove that travel writing has always been there before Candide and before Voltaire. And we start off with Herodotus, this very famous Greek historian who belongs to the 5th century before our common era. We spoke about what is it that he wanted from those travel writings and what he wrote in them. He focused on the religion and morals of the countries that he visited. And then we have other writers, especially in the early modern period. And then we come to another very famous writer by the name of Thomas More, who wrote Utopia. And perhaps Thomas More is the first one who even popularized the word utopia. And of course, utopia means nowhere, because the ideas and the ideals of utopia do not exist. It's an imaginary environment based on political principles or ideals. So we're talking in utopias, we talk about a perfect society, and obviously perfect societies where everyone is equal, where There is no private property. These are ideas and ideas that do not exist in our real world. Another example of travel literature is Gulliver's Travels by Johnson Swift, and it was written in 1726. And there is this idea that Voltaire may have been influenced by Gulliver's Travels and by Johnson Swift. What is interesting about Gulliver's Travels is that it is a dystopia or an anti-utopian kind of work. We call it dystopia. What else did he have from Swift? Voltaire took also this idea of satire. So Swift was very satirical in nature, and this is reflected in his work. The focus in Voltaire is on, or perhaps the background is this, idea of the earthquake that took Lisbon by storm and killed thousands upon thousands of people. And also, when we talk about traveling, you would have Candide traveling to different kinds of countries. He starts with Westphalia and then moves to Lisbon, and then Paris, and then Constantinople, and so on. And of course, Voltaire also draws heavily on travel writings by other people because he didn't go himself. He didn't go to these places, whether we're talking about Constantinople, South America. He didn't go, but he saw or read those travelogues, and he benefited from them for sure. And another influence on Voltaire, perhaps a contemporary to Voltaire, is Samuel Johnson. Samuel Johnson wrote a travel book by the name of The History of Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia. Abyssinia is modern-day Ethiopia. This was written in 1759. And they had their differences, of course. Johnson would used to look at Voltaire as a notorious radical and skeptic. But they are similar. It is true that they have bad opinions of each other, but they are very similar in their work. Both of them challenges the status quo and the hypocrisy of society. And so what is Candide? I mean, is it a novel? We call it a roman, but it's not a novel in its strict sense of the word, because it doesn't fulfill the generic requirements of a novel. Remember, we said that it can also be a fable or a parable where there is a moral lesson at the end. It can be described as such. It can also be described as philosophical tale, where, of course, there is a great deal of philosophy involved. Remember what we said, that it can also be a satire, where obviously Candide, as a satire, ridicules and mocks the feelings of individuals, institutions, or even society. But it is is an indirect satire because Voltaire allows his readers to draw their own conclusion. He never imposes this or that assessment on them. That's why we call it a or an indirect satire. This is the cover, the title page. As you can see, Voltaire is the author. Candide is the name of the novella. Optimism is the subtitle. And again, there is this reference that this is a translation from the German of Dr. Ralph. Not going to go into details about that because that would be very boring. We spoke about that already. Spoke about the title page. Again, we're talking about Candide, the character, this young man, and his personal history. Again, perhaps one way of subverting the fact that what is happening is truthful and can be investigated would be the fact that he started with once upon a time. So he is giving us this sense that it is a fairy tale. Again, it establishes this idea of irony and also this idea that this is perhaps a fake narrative that is not addressing people during the time or at the time. So the narrator is naive in the sense that he is not a reliable narrator. And perhaps one reason why he makes it as such is, I mean, again, for political reasons. He is trying to make sure that nobody would kind of investigate the work or say that this is perhaps is hinting at things that we do in our contemporary life. I mean, the novel or the novella has a lot of literary irony. One such ironies would be the use of a naive or deluded hero or unreliable narrator whose views of the world differ widely from the true circumstances recognized by the authors or readers. Again, you would have this discriminant, and this is perhaps what causes the irony, the fact that the narrator would give you something, but that causes nothing but humor, because if you compare it to what actually happens, there is a big gap. So much of the humor in Candide is derived from the ironic distance between the narrator's words and Voltaire's satirical attack on his society. Remember who said that what perhaps the focus of the novella or the work in general is the idea of optimism, that people, for the most part at the time, used to believe that they live in the best of all possible worlds. So obviously, empirical as he is, Voltaire is breaking this down. He is analyzing this in order to either prove it or disprove it. And obviously, the novel or the novella is a polemic against this sweeping optimism. He believes that there is no grounds for it, with the pain that is widespread in the world, with the diseases that are widespread in the world, the earthquakes and the wars that we have around us. There is no room, there shouldn't be any room for optimism. The other characters that we have that are equally important would be the character of Pangloss, and Pangloss happens to be the representative of those optimistic people, and there are so many. He represents optimism in the novel, and he happens to also be Candide's tutor. He is the inexhaustible spokesman on behalf of optimism. He is presented as an exaggerated comic creation who believes, you know, in absolute optimism, and he doesn't stop there. He promotes it among people. And one way of, kind of challenging this kind of optimism as it was happening in the 18th century would be that rich people they should be optimistic. Rich people are optimistic. Yeah, men are optimistic. So if you compare them to what was happening to women. So healthy people should be optimistic if you compare them to those who are sick. And slave owners are obviously optimistic. So there are sectors of society that are rightfully optimistic, but we're talking about minorities, right? So we're talking about a small percentage of population who are rich and have reasons to be optimistic. The healthy people and men in a male-dominated society would be, of course. But obviously, he's talking about the majority. He's talking about this idea of equity that everybody should be entitled to happiness, to a life that is free of pain and disease and everything in between. So where did they get um, where did they get this feeling of optimism from? Of course, it has physical underpinnings, and it also it also has philosophical. The physical is that this was also time of advancement and progress. It was, they started to build a big civilization, and the material civilization started to show. I mean, the different facets of life and how easy life became. And there was a philosophical underpinning. You have philosophers like Shaftesbury, Anthony Ashley Cooper, we call him the Earl of Shaft, was a very optimistic philosopher, and he used to promote this kind of philosophy, talking about benevolence and the fact that man is good by nature. So this was one. I mean, he was very popular, and people, or some people at least, followed him. And then we also have Alexander Pope, this very famous English poet. He wrote an epic, a big and a very long poem called Essay on Man, in which he is talking also about the fact that we live in, again, it's promoting this idea that we live in the best of all possible worlds, that partial evil is part of kind of a bigger plan for the universe, and the fact that we're limited, that's why we cannot see the wisdom of God. And of course, we have Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, this very famous a German philosopher. The focus with him was on the nature of God and the fact that God is omniscient, which means that all-knowing and is omnipotent, all-seeing and all-powerful, and the fact that you cannot compare the knowledge and the wisdom and the abilities of God to that of the human being. That's why God does things that human beings fail to understand, because of how limited human beings are. So he tries to establish in a logical way, he says that if we trust in God, if we can establish the fact that God is omnipotent and is omniscient, and we trust that, there is no reason for us to come and object and say, no, this is a bad world, or this is what we were promised. He believes that it's only that we are limited and we cannot see the big picture. And then these were all optimistic philosophers promoting the idea of philosophy, and you have on the other part of the scale, you would have people who are against this idea of optimism, and for good reasons. They would talk about the idea of pain and evil in the world. They would say, why? Why do we have evil in the world? If God has foreknowledge, why doesn't God stop evil from happening? Why do we have pain? Can't God? And God is able. So why can't God stop pain and disease from the world? And they start to have this kind of intellectual fight between rationalists like Wilhelm Leibniz, and empiricism in the case of people like Voltaire. So the main argument with people like Voltaire would be the idea that both pain and evil seem to be contradictory in a world supposedly overseen by a compassionate governor, God. And this is what Candide, the novella, is talking about all the time. We spoke about Leibniz, the fact that he's a rational philosopher who, yeah, it is true that he's using his mind, but nothing else. He's not an empiricist. He doesn't experiment on the grounds. So he simply says, since God is perfect by definition, it follows that he can do no wrong. So this is all logical, which is obviously opposing Voltaire, who happens to be empirical, tajribi. He uses his experience of the world around him through the senses to draw certain conclusions about it. So what triggered those ideas about optimism and perhaps opposing optimism? So people were happy and optimistic and everything until a number of things started to shake their trust and faith in optimism. One of them was the fact that there was a fissure, a long, narrow opening, some 5 meters wide, opening up under the Atlantic Ocean. And that would cause the Portuguese capital, Lisbon, to destabilize. And the next thing you know is that we have an earthquake, a big one. So buildings tottered and fell. And what is ironic was that it was a feast. They were celebrating what they call All Saints' Day, and the churches were full of people attending Mass. So, so the walls of the churches collapsed, and people were crushed in thousands. So that would shake their trust and optimism. So the question with skepticals like Voltaire would be, how could a benevolent and all-seeing deity or God possibly have ordained this? So, I mean, he's referring to the fact that people were out happy, celebrating, cooking their breakfast in open fires. And it was such a cool autumn air. And then the quake or the earthquake overturned the fires, which raged uncontrollably across the town or across town. And then what makes it worse is that a few minutes later, a violent tsunami swept in from the sea, drowning many of those who had not been crushed. So much of the infrastructure of the city was destroyed. Again, where is this benevolent deity? This seems to be the question that everybody was asked. So the Lisbon earthquake was compounded by the 7 Years' War. And then after that came the 7 Years' War, where Europeans killed each other and butchered each other. Again, why should we be optimistic if we have all those kinds of slaughters and suffering and pain? I think I'll stop on this note because that has been too long, and I'm sure you're tired. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Doctor.
Okay, before we leave, when is the midterm exam? So obviously it's not next week, right?
No, it's gonna be
Okay,
the week after that.
okay, so which means that we still have next Monday to finish off, perhaps for 45 minutes, and then the second part of the class next week is going to be revision, inshallah.
Doctor, I think the
Yeah,
midterm is next week. It's on the 16th,
which is what day?
next Wednesday.
Wednesday. So we're meeting anyway on Monday, right?
Yes, 14.
Okay. So we don't have a problem. I mean, everything is almost finished. So when we meet again on Monday, we will have like between half an hour and 45 minutes for the rest of Candide, and then the rest is going to be, inshallah, revision. So do you have any questions? No questions. Okay. Right. On this note and with this item, we'll come to the end of today's lovely class. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week, inshallah. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome.